Hey guys, it's Candy, and today I'm ready to share another book video with you guys. So as the title says, today I'm going to be sharing with you some books that I read that are out of my comfort zone. So I think this was one of the videos suggested by several of you guys when I posted on my Instagram quite a long time ago for what kind of book videos you'd like to see from me. I was like, this sounds like a lot of fun. So when I went to the bookstore, I picked out some books that I thought would be great for this video. And then the last book that I'll probably be reading and sharing with you in this video, I had already. So we're just gonna jump right in. Basically, I just tried to pick books that were not normal genres that I would read, which is obviously contemporary romance, literary fiction, thriller, mystery. I think that about covers it. So we're gonna hop right into the first book that I read for this challenge, which is The Alchemist. And I actually had to look up what an alchemist is, like the definition. And it is a person who transforms or creates something through a seemingly magical process. Totally makes sense for this book. If you don't know anything about this book, this was written quite a while ago. As you can see here, this is the 25th anniversary edition. And on Goodreads, it describes this book as fiction, a classic, fantasy, philosophy, spirituality, self-help, literature, adventure, and inspirational. So I flew through this in like 2 days. Obviously, I could have read it in 1 day, but I just had to let it digest. I will say, reading this book, I noticed that I would reread some of the lines. Like, I just felt like, oh, I just read something that I was really supposed to absorb and I didn't quite get it. So I would like go back and reread a paragraph or reread a sentence. On Goodreads, I rated this 2 stars. I know that sounds rough. And obviously me not really enjoying reading books like this plays a huge part. But I also just felt like the buildup of the story was so good and so intriguing that I just expected it to end a little bit more like making me feel good. And I was just like, oh, the story's over. Let's move on. I think the whole purpose of this book is to, and the main character in the book, Santiago, is chasing his dream with the utmost passion you could ever expect in a human being. Kind of concentrates on the idea of if you have a dream, like go out there and chase it. So in the beginning, Santiago, he's a sheep herder and he is on a mission to find this treasure. He meets all these different people along the way. There were moments when Santiago reaches some challenges and he finds these like unique ways of figuring things out that were kind of enjoyable to read, but just overall, I was like, happy to be done with it, ready to move on. And the next book that I'm actually about halfway through reading right now is very, very different than this. So let's just say that. So the next book I'm going to share with you guys is a memoir by Couric called Going There. If you guys don't know, Couric is a journalist. She was part of the Today Show, which was, I think, on NBC in the mornings for like 15, 16 years. And then she became the first solo female CBS evening news host or speaker or news person, whatever they're called. And let me tell you, did I read all 495 pages? No, there were a few, maybe more than a few. There's a lot of chapters in this book. Let's see. There's actually 99 chapters. So I would say there was probably 20 to 25 chapters that I would start reading that I was like, don't really care about that. Then there were some topics that she touched on that I found really interesting. Like, I didn't know that her first husband died of colon cancer and she became like a really big spokesperson for colon cancer. She actually had a colonoscopy like on television to help educate people that we need to have colonoscopies after a certain age. She did definitely talk about the Matt Lauer situation. I will tell you that I rated this 3 stars just because there were, let me share some things I didn't like about the book. I didn't like her sort of just pretentious, sort of like celebrity-like attitude towards her whole entire life. She really acted as though every part of her career was just so spectacular and no one has ever done the things that she's done. And she would like name drop all these like news people and celebrities, and it just felt like she was using all these names to try to like increase her status even further. And it just rubbed me the wrong way. It really seemed like it's been important to her even now to be considered a celebrity and to be considered famous. I feel as though if you're a person who's maybe interested in being like on a morning show or on a news channel or like a 2020 nightly report type channel, you'd probably find this book really interesting because she really focuses a lot on how she worked her way up the ladder and all the things that she had to do to get there. So I definitely learned a lot of things about her. I like memoirs. I mean, there's a really trustworthy bookstagrammer that I follow that I really admire and trust all of her book reviews. And when she read this book, she had given it 5 stars and said that she felt like she was Katie's best friend reading her diary. I personally did not get that feeling from it. It was still written from this perspective of, whoa, look at me. I've accomplished all these things and you should be so proud of me. That just came across sort of really snobbish in my opinion. Hey guys, so I am back with the next book, The Nightingale by Kristen. So if you're a person who reads a lot, or you talk to a lot of people that read a lot, or you follow people that share book reviews on social media like this, I guarantee you've come across someone that has stated and claimed that The Nightingale is the very best book that they've ever read. So of course, going into it, I had pretty high expectations. The Nightingale is actually a historical fiction book, which I can't say that I've really ever read before, because I'm the type of person, I look at the back of the book and as soon as I see something that says World War II, I'm out. Like if it says the year 1936, I'm out. I just shy away from those types of books. I guess I didn't really enjoy reading about history in school, and why would I want to read it when I'm reading for pleasure? You know what I mean? Maybe it kind of makes me sound like an unintelligent person, but these just aren't the types of books that I normally am excited to read. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. I just couldn't bring myself to give it 5 stars just because there were just some parts in the book that just drug on. Like, this book did not need to be this long. I'm sorry. This felt like there was definitely a lot of parts where she was just traveling, which I get. There's the struggle. Okay, maybe I should tell you what it's about. It takes place in France during World War II. So there's 2 sisters that we're following along. They're completely opposite from each other. And reading about their 2 stories, their experiences, it just really shows you how brutal war is. And it's not necessarily even just what we see in the movies or on TV. This is more of the like emotional impact and how it just changes these women forever. The writing is very beautiful. There's parts that are just so difficult and like devastating to read. You're just like crying. I'm sitting there trying to read through my tears because it just was so emotional. So both of these women are obviously very strong females. You have one of them who pretty much is willing to do anything to protect her family. And then you have the other sister who wants to be right there battling the Germans. She ends up saving these American and British pilots that crash in France. Just the bravery of these women is like anything I've ever heard of before. I think what I enjoyed the most is that you're just getting the women's perspective of what it's like during a war. And I know there's a lot of other books out there like this that are kind of somewhat similar. And after reading this, would I necessarily like put any of those books on my want to read list? Probably not. I'm glad I read it though, because like I said, it is such a popular, well-known book that now I can say, oh yeah, I read The Nightingale. All right, the next book that I attempted to read is this young adult book that I got when I went to Barnes & Noble with Carly. I found this in the young adult section and I was like, Ooh, that's a little different than anything I would normally read. It's called Her Majesty's Royal Coven by Juno Dawson. And when you look at the book, on the back, it basically says, at the dawn of their adolescence on the eve of the summer solstice, 4 young girls, Helena, Lonnie, Nima, and Elle, took the oath to join Her Majesty's Royal Coven, established by Queen Elizabeth I as a covert government department. Now, decades later, the witch community is still reeling from a civil war, and Helena is the reigning high priestess of the organization. Witches, warlocks, fantasy type book. I thought, I have never read a book about witches before. This should be pretty interesting. And unfortunately, this is a DNF for me. I did not finish. I tried so hard to get into it. I, of course, had to give it 1 star on Goodreads just because I didn't finish it. And I know there's people that love this book because the author really touches on a lot of subjects to do with like the LGBT community. And there's not a lot of books out there that touch on these topics. Talking about power, feminism, a lot of really great things, especially for young adults to read. And I don't know if it's just the words that are being used or the sentence structure, but I'm so sorry. I just could not do it with this book. Guys, time to talk about the last book of this challenge. Hopefully I don't regret doing this. I'm just sitting in front of my Mac computer using the camera on the screen. It's actually pretty good quality. I've never done this before. This is a fantasy series. It's a romance fantasy series, I would say. There are actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 books out in the series. This is the first book in the series, and it is insane. When I was done reading it, I was like, what did I just read? I give it 5 stars. It is amazing. I'm excited to read the next book, especially because Asha said that book 2 she feels is the best one, or at least it's her favorite of the series. However, I really need a break. So I'm actually going to read just a romance, just fluff and fun book after all these books that I've been reading the last 2 weeks. When I first started reading this book, at first I was like, wow, this is really confusing. I honestly don't know if I'm going to be able to make sense of this. It almost felt like the witch book all over again. So Asha had told me, she's like, hang in there. There's going to be words that are kind of made up. They're sort of not going to make sense, but the more you keep reading, you just pretend like you know what's going on, and it will make sense. And it definitely did. She was absolutely right. So it starts out, the main character, Farah, she is human, and she's out hunting, and she ends up killing a wolf who is a very important wolf. So this beast shows up at her door, takes her as prisoner, threatens her family. The beast takes her back to this castle, and come page 50, my jaw just dropped. If you read this series, I will tell you, it's when the beast sits down at the table. I was like, what just happened? That's when things got interesting. I literally must have read that line in the book of what happened when he sat down at the table 5 times, because I was like, what am I reading? I just have never read anything like this. So this whole challenge was totally worth it just to dive into these books, and it was the perfect way to end this challenge. One thing that I definitely took away from reading this series is, out of any of the books I've read, thrillers, rom-coms, even the historical fiction book that was pretty amazing writing, I think the brilliance it has to take for an author to write a book like this. I mean, I think it's pretty cool because you can just, your imagination can take you anywhere. It doesn't matter if you're making things up, like that's what makes it a fantasy. But I'm just like, this takes one crazy, sick in a good way, mind to write a story like this. And to think that there's more books that follow, I'm just stunned. I'm almost speechless over this first book. So clearly I recommend this out of all the books I've read. If you think maybe you're a historical fiction fan, obviously you're going to enjoy The Nightingale. You probably have already read it if you're a historical fiction fan. The other books, take it or leave it, but if you want to deep dive into a good series, I'm thinking that this is going to be 5-star all the way based off of this first book. So I really enjoyed this little challenge. I think it was definitely fun to read books that I normally wouldn't read. So thank you guys. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. You got some good recommendations from it as usual. And I will see you guys next Sunday with my July book haul. So stay tuned for that next week. Thank you guys so much again. Hopefully you're having a great weekend, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys.